Crista, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
I'm going to dive right in because I love it that people describe you as business optimizer. How did you earn that title?
You know how we all have these weird superpowers that we didn't really realize were superpowers until someone points it out to us? I
Mhm.
can just naturally see simple solutions to things. So you give me the most complex, hairy, ugly problem. I'm like, oh, why don't you just do this? Or someone will look at something and say, it's not working, or I want to get better results. And I just say, oh, well, you should just do this. And I did that for so many years. And
Mhm.
it never struck me that that wasn't what everybody else did until someone said to me one day, you know, that you just have this unique ability to optimize things, right? And then I heard business optimization, and I kept hearing this over and over again until finally someone said, you're the business optimizer, and it just stuck.
I love that. I love that. So, and I have to speak on your logo before it slips on because it's right behind you, and you hear a lot about leaning in, but I'm so curious about what is lean out and what does it have to do? I assume it probably has a lot to do with your methodology. So I'm really curious to know where did you come up with the idea and why the little four leaves?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lean out method itself has four core pillars, which is the four leaves of my logo. And leaning out is really nothing at all to do with leaning in. I actually had defined it before the book had come out. So everyone always asks if it's the opposite of that. And so it's really very quite different. But it's really about looking at what is adding value in your business, what is adding profit in your business, and eliminating anything that's not that. It's really lean is about increasing value while minimizing waste. And so leaning out is identifying in your business, where do you have waste? Where do you have things that don't make sense to be investing your time, money, and energy into? And how can you get rid of those so you have more space for the things that matter most and you can achieve the results that you want faster?
Hmm. When you speak about this, optimizing business and things like that, and I just keep thinking how often at least in the corporate world, we're much more reactive versus we're proactive. And so I'm curious what you think about that. What do you feel like? Do you see like the fact that so many companies are so reactive, it's not really helping them optimize much, right? Like what do you think about that?
Yeah, I work with both Fortune 50 companies and small scaling, like multi six, seven figure businesses. So I see this from all angles. And I think it is true. I think that's true across the board from businesses. By
Mhm.
nature, people do tend to be a little bit more reactive. It's hard for people to either be proactive, or even those who have really great intentionality and planning practices in place, things are just so dynamic and there's so much change that happens in the environments that sometimes it's hard to stick to that intentionality and stick to that proactive planning. So
Mhm.
I do find that people tend to be reactive. And when you're always putting out fires, it's really hard to do things to optimize what you have because everything feels like an emergency all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious also, have you seen because you started the company before COVID, so it was like 2019, right? October 2019, which is it's the same year that I started my company, and so I thought that was interesting. And for me personally, like COVID hit, and like in some ways it helped, in some ways it destroyed. But I'm curious, did this, because what you're doing very much so, I assume a lot of companies had that reality check during COVID. So how did that help, or maybe it hurt, but I don't know. But how did that, I would assume, accelerated your business and methodology?
Yeah, if there is ever a point in time where businesses realize, oh, wait, I need to be lean, I need to focus on
Mhm.
operational efficiency, I need to get more time and profit out of what I'm already doing, it's times of major change or major stress in the external environment, right? So, times of COVID, even currently, a lot of the things that I'm seeing out there, a lot of people are really realizing the value of their operations, of operational efficiency, of optimization, instead of always going off and putting their focus on more marketing and things that tend to be more really resource intensive. They're trying to increase profitability by eliminating expenses, by eliminating waste. And so I found that not everybody got it, but I actually saw a lot more people recognizing the value of it because of some of those external challenges.
Mm. And when you work with organizations, who is your client in the organization itself?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because when I'm working with a smaller business, I tend to work really closely with the CEO and their right-hand person, which could, depending on the level, be a COO or a director of operations or an operations manager. So
Mm-hmm.
I tend to work with those individuals most, as well as with the teams, because real change ends up happening within the team. And
Mm-hmm.
so the leaders set the direction, they set the vision, but ultimately it's the team who's usually owning that and implementing on that. So I'll end up working with the teams to look at what do we need to do, and working with them to actually implement those changes from a planning and oversight and leadership perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in a really large organization, I'm usually brought in on behalf of the CIO or the CEO, but I end up working with teams at multiple levels. So usually I'm brought in and it's okay, this is great. Here's the change that we want to make. It's usually an agile transformation. Now go work with my leadership team and all of their teams to implement this change. So I'll end up working across multiple levels of the organization in order to change an entire division, or in some cases, an entire company.
Mm. And across your clients, have you seen a theme around what's the biggest challenge when it comes to change?
Well, it's interesting. I'll start with larger companies because a lot of the work that I do in larger companies is lean and agile business transformation. And for a company who has worked a particular way for a really long time, and people who have worked in certain roles in certain ways for a really long time, the
Mm-hmm.
resistance to the change is usually fear. And I think it challenges somebody's identity. There's this role that they used to have, that the role is not only possibly going away, but the way they used to work isn't valued in the new model in the same way that it was. It's almost criticized in a way. And so that can be really hard for somebody who knows how to be successful within a certain set of rules. And all of a sudden, you're completely changing the rules on them. So even if they can look outside themselves and see how it's better for the company, how they can see that it's better long term, I think it creates a lot of internal resistance because they don't know where they fit, if they're going to be successful, if they're going to be valued. And so I think you end up with a lot of resistance at most of the levels all the way up
Mm-hmm.
until finally people accept that it's there to stay and try to make the most of it and fit into it in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because there's a lot of change happening in organizations across board. I'm in the kind of corporate recruitment and talent development space. And I see the biggest struggles that kind of CEOs are having right now is around talent. And a lot of it is because for generational talent, new technology coming in, competitive business, at least I'm in the DC area, so huge government contracting space. So very like, let's do it yesterday. I need unicorns for talent, right? So it's been a real struggle, and a lot of that I relate to in terms of the fear of change. It's very uncertain right now. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, I agree completely. There's so many factors at play. And I think I actually really love the fact that people aren't really settling for a lot of the kind of poor behavior that had happened in companies before, that people are being more discerning with where they want to work and what they expect, with having the ability to work from home or having more of a wellness focus and not having the same expectation that they work 24/7. And like, I love that there's some of these changes that are coming, but it's so hard for companies to know how to adapt and how to adjust and what to do with it. So I do see that quite a bit as well. And I think it'll all settle down. I think it'll all settle in. I think the companies that I'm seeing, I'm curious if you're seeing this too, that are most successful are the ones who aren't looking at this as a temporary inconvenience and who are embracing a new way of working with and leading their teams, how they hire, how they retain, and the type of people that they're looking to attract. Are
Mm.
you seeing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think though, like you said, a lot of companies are not looking at it that way, but those that are successful, they're just really kind of saying, okay, this is where we are. This isn't the new way we're gonna move forward. What I see a lot is, and I don't know if it's a lot to do with the media and just the things that are out there, but I see a lot of companies are trying to kind of sound good to the outside. What I mean by that is there's a lot of push, of course, with new generations coming in. And it's all about, making a very nice work environment. And it's all about all these things. And it's all very important. But then it doesn't work for every company, right? Like, I mean, from small companies to large companies, resource-wise, what kind of managers you have, what kind of work you do. Government contracting is very different from a traditional kind of corporate setting. So some things that you might want to do in a government contracting, as much as you want to do as a company, because that's what all the experts out there are talking about. Like, you need to have, these opportunities for people to grow and develop and all of that. But when your people are 95% of utilization rate and billable, it leaves very little space. And so it's a whole system that needs to be addressed, from how we do government contracts to the kind of talent that we employ to make that kind of change happen. So, and I'm telling you this because it's something I've recently kind of dealt with, and it just comes to a point where you have to be realistic as a company. That's what I see. To be realistic of what can you do for your people, right? In times of change, what can you do that's realistic versus trying to achieve something that just, it takes the whole system to transform in order for you to achieve that. So yeah, I think a lot of companies are still on kind of that bandwagon of like, they're doing things that are trendy, but is it really effective for them? Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And I think there's so much in what you had said there that is so important. Is there's the company culture itself, and you have to know who the company is at their DNA, what their culture is, and not every change is going to align with the culture of that company. So it's looking at how that happens, but then it really is looking at the entire ecosystem and looking at the first step. There's things that you can do that don't require the change of the entire company and the entire ecosystem around you. But over time, you do need to completely shift the ecosystem. So I think it needs to be a real commitment, and it needs to be a long-term change that you're incrementally making, and you can see the path forward, as opposed to, I see a lot of companies just more reactively doing things because they think they need to. And it doesn't fit. It doesn't feel cohesive. It feels very fragmented for the employees or the people coming in, and they're not getting a lot of traction or results with it.
Yeah, it's just very sporadic. It's just like, we're just going to do this, but there's no process. There's no long-term vision for those things. There's no human resource for that particular, part or department or arm of the company that trying to do this. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see this very much so. Again, particularly because of where I'm at, it's a lot of government contract, and I see a lot of these kind of companies just making the same mistakes. And I'm like, you have to just, you got to do something that works for you. Do something. Not saying don't do anything, but do something, but don't just follow the trends. But I see also, I'm curious your opinion on this. I see a lot of talk, and again in the media, like publications, about what employers should be doing. And the company needs to do this, and the employer needs to provide this. But there's very little coverage, very little to none coverage about what are we as employees? How can we as employees apply the agile methodology essentially to our own career growth and development? Right. So do you do any work on one-to-one, like when you work with teams? Is that one of the things like that you do you talk to them about that? Like, it's not just a company, like it takes every individual in the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, right, if anybody is showing up for something as purely a job, you always run a risk that they're going to leave to the next best opportunity, the next best job. And that's human nature, right? We're always looking for the thing. But if you can tie somebody to the mission, if they really deeply understand why they're doing what they're doing, and if they embrace agile principles as how they work, not just as this thing that they need to do, a set of ceremonies or things they need to show up at, but it's a way that they think. And they have ownership over how they achieve the results that they want to. They have autonomy in how they work and what they do. I think it changes somebody's opinion of a particular role as an employee. I think it becomes less of just this place I have to go until 5 and then I can leave, to there's this really exciting thing that we're working on, and I can't wait to get in there. And today I'm going to work with so-and-so, and we're going to figure out how to do this thing. And this launch is coming, and I can't wait to figure out how we're going to do this and hit this result. And it's a very different behavior in people. And as someone who's led a lot of agile transformation at an entire company level down to a small team level, you can tell in employees
Mm,
which ones are kind of phoning it in, checking the box because they feel like they have to, but they are so disconnected and they are going to leave the next opportunity that comes along. To
mhm.
those who are bought in and excited, they're excited and they want to be a part of it. And they've kind of embraced more agile in their role as opposed to it just being something they do. And I think for those of us who run small businesses and we have really small teams, and the investment that we put in people feels like such a serious investment in what we
Yes.
do, that's the person that we want. We want the person who's so bought into the vision, who has that ownership and that autonomy and wants to be the one who's delivering those results and achieving those outcomes. That's the person that we want. So I think as employees, we want to be that person and we want to find the place where we can be that person. And I
Mhm.
think as employers, we want to look for and cultivate a culture of those types of people.
Mm. I love that you said around that we as employees, we have to be that we also have to find a company and company that aligns with our values, right? Like company that aligns with kind of what we want to put out into the world. And I think that is the biggest issue today in organizations is that a lot of I feel like it's changing because a lot of people are looking for a change. So if they're not satisfied in their job or they don't feel like it's aligns with those core values, they do try to make a change. But I still see that there's a lot of individuals who are in companies that are just there for the because they need a paycheck, which is fairly so, because people have responsibility and not everybody is going to have a dream job, and that's just the reality of life, right? Everybody has different circumstances. But I think that a big part of the population could do something around that. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because that's a rabbit hole I've been on for many podcast episodes, but it starts in education system, right? It's like, how do we actually help young people get into roles? Because you see a lot of that, the disconnect at work, because people are not aligned with the values, and that's because they're never prepared necessarily to choose the right opportunity for them, or have that freedom to change, meaning that a lot of times when we get into jobs, you get the golden cufflinks or handcuffs, right? You got bills to pay, responsibility. It's very hard to make a change. And then you become that grumpy employee that's not satisfied with their job. And it's a whole vicious circle that we end up in. And I agree, in order for organizations to be innovative, people have to enjoy what they do, right? And I'm not talking about holding hands kumbaya 100% of the time, but enjoy it to some extent and feel that you're adding to the larger mission.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And some of the biggest mistakes that I see, which I'm sure you see too, is people in organizations are really good at telling people what they need to do, but they don't always tell people why they need to do it, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't tell people why they need to do it enough. They don't bring it back to the vision. They don't bring it back to the strategic objectives or whatever those drivers are. And instead, it's more, did you do this? You said you were going to do this. And people lose the connection to why they're doing what they're doing. So I find the more you can talk about why and the impact something's going to make, or you make it where somebody gets how their role and what they're doing plays into the bigger picture, the more bought in the right people will be.
Yeah, I agree. The why, very, very important. So to shift our focus, what has been your why for starting, to go into your own independent route?
Yeah, so I've always worked with small businesses and entrepreneurs on the side while also consulting and working as an employee. I've kind of shifted back and forth between the two over these past 23 years with really large scale Fortune 500 companies. So I've kind of always done both. But over time, I realized I really love working with small businesses and entrepreneurs because I'm so much closer to the transformation, and the larger the company, the slower the transformation is to happen.
Mm,
And I love the work that I do, but I really wanted to take that work, and I especially wanted to take lean and agile principles, which are not talked about much in small business and in entrepreneurship, and really infuse those in to be something that small business owners could use to achieve a whole lot better results while working a whole lot less, because
mm,
they don't have so much of the noise and distractions that come up when you're not focused on being lean and you're not being agile and adaptive in what you're doing. So for me, it was just more of a passion of being able to see the results and helping other businesses get to that vision that they have a lot faster than they would have without these practices.
mm. What are some things you're really excited about for the remainder of this year? Maybe something you have in the pipeline for next year that, of course, not giving away any secret sauces or anything that you don't want to share yet.
No, well, It's interesting in my business journey because even though I have a business lean out method, for the most part, people have always hired me as
Mhm.
the expert, me as the person they want to work with. And there's a lot of really smart and really amazing humans out there. And I am a team based person by nature. I love team. So
Mm,
I have been surrounding myself with an absolutely incredible team of rock stars, like my lean dream team. And I've been making that team available to my clients. And
nice.
so I'm now at the point where I am selling services that I don't touch at all. My
Mm,
team actually leads them. And that's a really, really fulfilling and really exciting place to be. So when I
mm,
look ahead at the next year, I think it's just continuing to refine that, continuing to build up the amazing rock stars around me, and being able to support our clients in more meaningful and broader ways because I can bring in people with so many different skill sets where we can really hit all of the different facets of scaling where they don't have to go to a lot of different people. We could be that one-stop shop for them for
mm,
scaling, but have real true experts to support them.
mm. And how do you stay on top of the game, just on top, because it's ever changing, the world of business. How do you stay on top of the game? How do you make time in your busy schedule with running a company and a team to stay on top?
I love to read. I'm a big reader. I love listening to podcasts. I like to personally work on self development. But the way that I do that is I protect every Friday in my schedule. I call it my innovation day. I
Mm,
occasionally will schedule something on a Friday, but for the most part, I protect that entire day to work on my business and to work on innovative ideas, moving the business forward, or developing myself as the leader of the business. So I've got set space in my calendar every single week for that. And that's really how I do it because until I had that day, it just always was this thing I'd love to do, but I always felt behind, like I wasn't making space for it.
I love that. I think everybody, whether you have a company or not, I think everybody should just have this innovate my career, innovate my business day, half a day, 2 hours, weekend. I love that concept.
Yeah, I
I
always
love it.
recommend for people that they have an innovation hour. If you have a really busy schedule, a really busy life, you can always find an hour. So I
Yes.
think you should have an innovation hour and an optimization hour. And those are the two things that I would add to any week. And it is completely transformational what you do. And then over time, you could certainly increase those. Typically, your team owns the optimization. You go all in on the innovation and increase the amount of time on it. But innovation and optimization hours are pretty magical.
I love it. I love it. What is the I'm sure there's many things out of your accomplishments that you're proud of, but what is the one thing you would say could be in your personal life, could be in professional, but what are you most proud of so far in your career and life?
I think the thing I'm most proud of, honestly, is completely walking away from my big corporate clients and working exclusively with small businesses and entrepreneurs because it's what I had done for 20 years. Really great revenue. I didn't have to market, I didn't have to sell. People knew me. I had more business than I knew what to do with. It was something that was really comfortable and something that I was really good at.
Mm.
And it just at the end of the day ended up being different from who I wanted to work with in this next chapter. So making that decision and sticking with it, even though it was, it's almost like starting a business over again from scratch, even though I had the business for a while. But when you make that change and 80% of your revenue all of a sudden goes away, it's basically kind of restarting in a way.
Yeah. And I'm impressed with your website because you have, first of all, I love the sort of what's the word? Um what am I looking for? Like the highlights, like I love you have the 2 hour FIFO, figure the F out. I love that because sometimes, I love the whole, even when you first started talking, when you talk about that you kind of see things in a simple manner. And I think a lot of that is just, we're so caught up, and I relate so much to it. It's like, just figure the F out, and sometimes all you need is a couple of hours to actually kind of, at least begin to start taking action forward. And that's what people struggle with the most. So I love that. Tell me a little bit more about that. Who is this 2 hours session for?
Yeah, it's so funny because I would do these 1 hour just get to know people calls,
Mhm.
and all the time people would end the call and say, "Oh my God, that 1 hour, I just completely transformed my business. I never would have thought of that." People have
Mhm.
left me these rave reviews on Facebook and posted everywhere. And I thought about it and I was like, I feel like for somebody I don't know, an hour might not be exactly enough time, But in 2 hours, I feel like I could completely help somebody get unstuck, move forward, reimagine their business model, work through a issue or an opportunity, whatever it is. So I created the FIFO session, and it is amazing what we can get done in 2 hours. It's almost like spending an entire day together and moving people through to get unstuck. So it's really
Mm,
any business owner at any level. Although I tend to work with businesses more in a place of scaling, the thing that I love most about FIFO is that it can really be any business idea, opportunity, or challenge that you have that you just want to brainstorm with a strategist who's kind of been there, done that. And I can quickly help you move through and ask the right questions to get you to the right answer in your business.
No, your website is full of amazing, just even resources and guides. And I highly recommend whoever's listening. I'm going to make sure to put your website in the show notes to kind of access some of these things because it's just phenomenal. Really, it's just super relevant. I feel to so many people. So good job on the website because I'm a huge fan of like websites. So I'm always like evaluating people's website, and I just love yours. Like I just feel like it's so down to the core and useful and practical. I love it. Where else can people get a hold of you if somebody wants to follow your content aside from your website? Is there somewhere else you hang out at more?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website's leanoutmethod.com, but really the core place to follow me is my podcast. If you're a podcast listener, which if you're here, I'm assuming you are, you could find me at leanoutpodcast.com. I release a new show every week and I talk a lot about things like we talked about on this show here. And where I hang out is Instagram. Instagram's my happy place. So it's my name, Crista Grasso on Instagram. It's mostly just me and my personal insights and cute pictures of my dog. It's not some some major business philosophy, but if you're kind of curious what I do in my life, you'll find me on Instagram.
Nice. And the last question I have for you, which is a question I ask all my guests, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
So, one of the things that I believe so fully in is that we are meant to live a rich, fulfilled life. And part of that is the work that we do, whether we're working for someone, whether we have our own business. So, to me, I think the most important question is every time you're making a decision is, does this support the rich, fulfilled life that I want to live?
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to make decisions that don't because, as you talked about before, there's bills to pay. There's something. So you've got to take something that might not be the perfect fit role. But I don't think you ever want to settle. I think you want to do as much as you can those things that are in alignment. And where you make a decision out of alignment, you want to do it with intentionality and you want to come back and re ask yourself that question until the answer is yes.
I love that. I love that. Krista, thank you so much. The Business Optimizer. I love your content. I'm going to follow. I have not followed the podcast yet, but I will. Or maybe I have. I don't remember honestly, but I haven't listened to it yet. I can tell you that, but it's definitely on the list. So I'm going to make sure to do that. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And hopefully we'll have you back again maybe next year or a year down the line or something when you have completely outsourced everything to a team and maybe you're moving on to something else. And I'd be curious to hear about that as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation.